I think we have a good group, so we can start now. Welcome, everybody. This is Heather Riggs with the New England Museum Association. I'm actually in the Arlington office today, taking advantage of the NEMA AC. Thank you, NEMA. So I just want to welcome everybody to our town hall on historic sites. What does opening even mean? I know that's a subject that has come up quite a bit in earlier town halls, so we want to explore that session, that topic. And just to let you know that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the NEMA website later on this afternoon. And just in case if you ever do miss a NEMA webinar or town hall, go to the NEMA website and under the calendar section, you'll see a link to our YouTube page and you can catch up on that. Or if you want to share it with colleagues, we love sharing and stuff like that. So I'm going to actually turn this over because we have an hour and an hour goes by very quickly. So I would like to introduce our NEMA PAG chairs for the Historic Site Management. Kelsey Mullen is the Director of Education at the Providence Preservation Society, and Emma Stratton is Executive Director at the American Independence Museum. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Great, thank you, Heather. Hi, this is Emma. Again, I'm the Executive Director of the American Independence Museum in Exeter. I'm coming to you from my very sweltering apartment in Portsmouth, New Hampshire today. Hope you all are doing well and staying cool. We're excited to have you here today to talk and I guess brainstorm a little bit and share our experiences. I know it's been an interesting now 4 months, hard to believe for all of us, and want us to come together and share experiences, ask questions, and be able to have a discussion that is unique to our historic sites, since I know they all present challenges for us. For me at the Independence Museum, we have two 18th century buildings, and we are looking through the lens of kind of tours, both indoor and outdoor and virtual, and then also our programming as well, how we can do that. We just completed a virtual Independence Festival that we had over the past 2 weeks, and I'm happy to share experiences about that for planning a virtual program. But also want to talk more about the unique challenges for sites. So I will turn it over to Kelsey to tell us a bit more about her organization as well, and then we'll jump in.
Yes, hello and welcome. Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad you can join from all reaches of the New England region. We also want to recognize that folks are in very different stages of reopening, and that's part of asking the question, like, what does this even mean for all of us? Some states have been open to museum activity for a month or more, and some places are still just, creaking the door open and welcoming visitors in. I am the Director of Education at the Providence Preservation Society. And we are not a museum, so we're dealing with a separate set of issues. We do have two historic buildings, but they serve mostly administrative functions for us. And one of our historic buildings is something of a visitor center for tourists here in Providence as they start their journey on the historic College Hill. Mostly our concerns are around programming and audience engagement. How do we maintain a connection with our audiences in the long term beyond, we're 4 months into this, but this could go on much, much longer. How do we combat Zoom fatigue and invite people to share honestly and vulnerably in our programming? How do we tackle big subjects such as race and preservation, which is certainly top of our mind in sort of our programmatic calendar. So that's where we are, less about the physicality of reopening and more about long-term engagement with our audiences. We do have 4 big, broad topic areas that we're hoping to cover today that we think will apply to most everyone. Those areas are tours, programs, staffing, and sanitation. And just to kick us off, we're wondering which you want to start with. So if you could let us know in the chat box which of those 4 topic areas you want to begin our discussion. I'm sure we'll get to all of them, and they're certainly interwoven. Let us know now, please.
I should also mention that one of the nice things about the town hall is that everybody does have a voice. So if you want to either type in the chat if you have a discussion that you would like to go forth on, or unmute yourself, we love hearing your voice. Love seeing you guys. Hearing your voice is also special too. So definitely one of those things, make sure that you do. If you have something to add, a question, unmute yourself.
So I am seeing a lot of programming, maybe followed up by tours, which are interrelated. I know for some folks, tours are their programs, and that is somewhat the case for us at the Providence Preservation Society. Typically the summer season, we do less sort of structured programming, panels, presentations, that sort of thing, and we do more outside excursions and tours. And we have more or less canceled all of ours for the summer. It is not, we decided it was not feasible for somebody to wander around with an iPad giving a mediocre tour of historic buildings and places all over Providence. And so we're still coming up with something of a backup solution, but I'm curious to hear how some of you all are handling programming. Have you started offering programming yet? Are you still thinking about it? Anybody can jump in.
I'll jump in first and share a little bit about our experience at the American Independence Museum. We have done only virtual programs at this point all summer, and right now we're trying to think about what the fall is going to look like. The fall tends to be our busiest programmatic season. Again, in New Hampshire, we get a lot of people coming through leaf peeping in the fall, so that tends to be when we do a lot of our programs, and almost all of our programs are based on site or have traditionally been on site. So far this summer, we have moved our festival, which is typically a one-day event with 3,000 people, to be a virtual festival by kind of breaking up the different components and presenting it virtually. And then also our summer camps are all virtual this year. So what became really important for us with programming was still having something that was a hands-on component or required people to get outside, also recognizing that we're in the summer and people maybe don't necessarily want to sit in front of their screen all day. So with our festival, we came up with a town-wide scavenger hunt that we put on Instagram, and we encouraged people to find different historic sites in town and take a selfie with them and tag us in them. And we had a number of families participate. So that was a great way to still do some programming that got people outside and learning about history that we guided, but didn't require any face-to-face interaction. And for our summer camps, we are doing kind of 2 Zoom meetings a week, but as part of the program, they get a kit of supplies for that week that they get mailed to them. So that could be books and activities, worksheets, so they again have something tangible and hands-on to work with during the week. And we're rolling out that program for our homeschool program as well, which is a program we always had, but we're expecting to see a little more interest in that in the fall, depending on how the school year looks for different areas. But what's been nice about our virtual programming as well is it has brought in people from all over the country. So while we have less people or no people on site, we've really been able to expand our reach across the country, which has been fantastic and an unexpected kind of side effect of all of this. So we've just started dabbling again in that virtual programming, which has proved successful, but it's taking a lot of effort to get that off the ground and get that implemented and get our staff familiar with doing that as well, who are so used to doing on-site program. It's not just reimagining the programming, it's really retooling the entire program. So that's been our experience. And I'm interested to hear if other folks have been doing either on-site programs or maybe virtual programs as well, and how that's been going.
Virtual camp is is an extra layer of challenge that you've laid for yourself, Emma.
Yes, yes. And someone was asking if anyone is charging for online programming. I can certainly speak to the museum and say, for camp we are. For our festival, we did not, but had a suggested donation. So every time we asked someone, all of our lectures were presented via Zoom. We had a donate button that asked people, and we listed what a suggested donation was for that. And where our normal festival typically brings in about $10,000, we brought in about 1,000 through donations for this year's festival, which we anticipated going into it. We did not think we were going to make $10,000 on a virtual festival. So we've been kind of playing around with those pricing structures as we're developing more online programming.
So I'll jump in. I'm Lane Sparkman and I work at the Rhode Island State House. And I would say our chief program is our tours that we give to mainly, well, not mainly, largely during the months that we've been closed, to children, to school children. So we turned that into a virtual tour program. And I would say it was pretty successful. I mean, it was as simple as it could possibly be, in the sense that I just kind of reacted and came up with my best Band-Aid version, which was to create a big Flickr album of photos of the State House. And then I would join a classroom, join whatever platform the teacher was working on. I would share my screen and I would just pretend like we were in the building. And I would say, I thought one of the cool things was we had these 360-degree photos, so we could give the kids a sense of being in the physical space. And the State House in Rhode Island is a pretty remarkable physical space. So we would go in and stand in the rotunda and imagine that we could look all around us, for example. And then I basically just delivered it very much like a tour. Teachers were the moderators because I chose not to have two computers going at once because I just didn't think my brain could handle that. So the teacher was the moderator. I just saw the shared screen. And sometimes if it was Zoom, I could see some of the kids. If it was Google, I usually couldn't. And then, as the school year ended, and I mean, I did 40 or more of those. So lots and lots of kids ranging from third grade to, I think I had one class of 10th graders and groups that were as small as 15 and as large as 80 or 90. And then I was asked to do the same thing for a senior center that was trying to come up with community events for seniors who were spread out and unable to see one another. And so I did the same thing, although they ended up doing it. They broadcasted it as a Facebook Live. And so we had maybe 20 participants live actually. And then 100 plus who have watched it subsequently. I haven't checked it recently, but in the next 2 days, 100 plus people had watched it on their own time. And then we're working on creating a virtual tour using Matterport, this tool that's the Preservation Society of Newport County has been using to make tours. And I think that seems like a pretty good low-cost solution for historic sites, and I think there might even be a town hall about this later, so I won't go into it too much. But then the last thing is a program that we do with 2 other organizations, and we're trying to figure out how to do it now. So typically the model had been, we'd have 100 kids at a time in the State House, rotating between 4 sites, 25 kids at each place. So like, how do we manage that, and assuming that no kid is going to come to the State House for the fall. And so right now we're talking about making little videos that the students and teachers can watch on their own time, and then scheduling some Zoom sessions or Google Meet sessions where we can talk together about questions that might have been raised through the video. But the reason I thought of it is you mentioned kits. And so we're also thinking like, what kind of kit can we create? Originally I was like, oh, it could be a kit that travels, but of course it can't be a kit that travels. So it'll go to one classroom and it'll only be useful if they're meeting in class, as opposed to doing remote learning. But some sort of kit with some of the kinds of things that we would be showing them if they were actually in the State House. So that we're just at the stage of pricing that out and seeing what we would want to include. Because I do think having a tangible thing really makes a big difference. So those are the things we're doing. I just saw that. So the app is called Matterport, and it was designed for realtors to use. And short version is it costs $708 a year to be hosted by Matterport, and it basically creates a really terrific 360-degree tour. And if you want to check some out, go look at the Preservation Society for Newport County. They've done a whole bunch of them now. They have a research fellow who's basically, the minute the building's closed, just began. And what's really great, and I'm not a Matterport expert, but one of the really great things about it that the guy who's doing it pointed out is that in addition to being a virtual tour, it also, gives you really high resolution photographs of your historic site. So you have a baseline, oh my gosh, the ceiling started leaking in 2026. Well, when did that leak start? Well, in 2020, it looked exactly like this. And so it's a nice tool for preservation purposes. It gives you floor plans too, and all sorts of nifty stuff like that.
Anybody else want to share what they're doing with programming, and maybe speak to this question that I know a lot of people have, which is charging? How do we create these structures that work and seem fair for the types of content that we're producing?
Hello, everyone. This is Amy Wilmot from Massachusetts State Parks. I work for the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We are not quite delving into the virtual programming, but we have been updating and creating new self-guided tours and posting them on our website for people to download and take with them. For example, we have a mansion at Borderland State Park. So we're putting up a self-guided tour about the gardens and the trout pond and some of the outdoor nearby elements of the mansion that people can walk, through and look at, but also have a little bit of information in front of them that they can engage with. We also have Pilgrim Memorial State Park, which is home of Plymouth Rock. And right now we typically have 5 education staff there. Right now we have 0, and we're not offering any programs or in-person, interpretation, but we are working on a self-guided brochure, just so when people go through the park, it's a memorial landscape with many statues and monuments and plaques. And we're kind of, trying to think of creative, but not very technologically advanced ways of sharing some of our information with our visitors. So that's where we are right now.
Hey, Amy, this is Emma. Could you speak a little more about the format that your self-guided tours are taking? Are you doing like printed brochures that people can pick up when they're there, or is it online as well, just as like a kind of PDF or on their website or on your website that they can pull up, or are you using something more like an app?
Yeah, so we usually have self-guided brochures in print form for people to take, but because we just don't want to have any kind of tangible objects that people are all going to, a brochure holder to open and grab, we removed all those. So we are taking them from, some of them are in sort of the folded brochure 2-sided format. And people at home, we find, can't really print out some of the sizes of the paper, that we typically use, or the color is too much and people don't want to print a whole lot of color on their personal computers. So we came up with a template that we're using that people can print out 8.5 by 11, one-sided, staple it together and bring it with them. We also have used an app in the past called Pocket Sites. There is a DCR tour on there for one of the Boston Harbor Islands, and we're in the process of taking the information from that app and also putting it into a printed or in a, like a PDF that people can print on their own and bring with them.
This is Matt Villamino. I'm a colleague of Amy's, just in a different region. I just pasted into the chat box one of the parks in my region, Wachusett Mountain State Reservation, the page that has a couple of the self-guided opportunities there. Those are a little bit less tour options, specifically go point to point to point. It's a little bit more on the flowers and the trees that are there, so you can explore and see what's there. And I know we do have a bunch more that should be coming out in the next few weeks.
This is Janet Colsino from Connecticut Landmarks. I am responsible for 2 historic sites in Hartford, and we have done some on-the-ground programming. We are home to one of Connecticut's historic gardens, and we also routinely participate in Connecticut Trails Day, and I lead a walking tour of historic Main Street, Hartford, and I was actually able to upload information from that tour to an app called Easy Travel, IZI.travel. And it was really cool because you can upload photographs, including historic views, which is something I didn't always get to show when people were on the ground taking the tour with me. And you can record audio. And this was a good option because Connecticut was just heading into reopening outdoor museums and garden spaces at the time of Connecticut Historic Gardens Day. And so even though our garden is only about 1 acre in size, I was able to create a walking tour, a guided audio tour of the garden. And this time because people were coming on to site, I had to unlock gates, and they were scheduling through Eventbrite their appointment times, so we weren't overwhelmed with too many visitors. I was seeing a lot of people actually making use of their smartphone and listening to that audio guide on the site, whereas in past years we would have been walking around and showing people things. And again, I was able to include historic photographs of our garden that wouldn't normally be out on display for Garden Day. So that was a good option. And then we are going to be trying out our outdoor concert series in the month of August. So we're making plans for that right now. And we've got 3 dates set and are going to have to be, you know, spray painting, social distance spots for people to sit on our lawn, and we're regulating how many people can come in through free Eventbrite registration.
So for Easy Travel, did they have to have the app on their phone, or do they get to it through your website? So they download the app.
You have to download the app, but you can actually use, you can look at it on a website too. So if you don't want to go out, you can go through the whole tour on a desktop computer as well. And I was concerned because a good portion of our demographic is older adults, and they were coming in with their smartphones with headphones on and walking through the tour and keeping their distance, and it seemed to work really well. And I found, you know, uploading the photographs, recording the text, and then dropping text in was really pretty easy to use with that site. So if anybody's looking for a walking tour kind of site, I would recommend that. It's free.
Kelsey, I think you're muted.
Yeah. Jana, do you mind talking a little bit more about how you're preparing for an on-site program? You mentioned spray painting squares for an outdoor concert. How have you started talking with your staff? How are you starting to prepare for that?
We've had task force meetings within our organization. We have 11 historic sites across Connecticut. So we've been preparing for opening indoors, but then also talking with our task force about what needs to happen out of doors. I know Connecticut, the Department of, oh gosh, DECD, I can't remember what it's for, has guidelines for the state for reopening for culture and tourism. So we're going through, we have to self-certify, and I mean, I've been doing things on the ground like measuring our garden and laying out in a diagram, you know, how many people can fit, talking on the phone to see, you know, capacity wise, what category of event we would fall into. The staff itself isn't going to have a huge amount to do. We're not going to open our buildings. So we're just going to open the gate, and we'll be greeting people, making sure they're wearing masks, telling them, you know, about what's going on. But it's an event we've run for many years, and I think we have a lot of people who understand kind of what's going on with social distancing, and they're just anxious to get out of their house and come back and do something, and then, you know, support live music, because this is a group that's really been hurt by the closing. So, yeah.
Can I give a shout out to, there was an earlier NEMA, I don't think it was a town hall, I think it was a presentation that was done by Leslie Jones from the Preservation Society and someone else about reopening that I thought was great. She walked through all the steps that they took, and there were many, and they have, you know, however many buildings that are under their stewardship. I found it really informative and helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could remember more about the date or anything, but I guess if you go to that spot that they were talking about on the NEMA website, it'll probably turn up.
So Deanna asked the question, how many people are planning to reopen indoor sites or have already opened their indoor sites? Because I know the states are all at different levels of reopening.
I'm happy to jump in and tackle that one at the American Independence Museum. We are planning, with the current New Hampshire state guidelines, we are discouraged from offering guided tours, but can do self-guided tours. And with our 2 historic properties, we are going to be opening one in September, and that is our Tavern Building. And the reason we chose to do that one first is because it actually has windows and doors we can open to allow for air circulation. Our other historic site does not have windows and doors that can open, nor does it have any sort of central HVAC system. So in addition to having smaller rooms, we also feel like there is no good air circulation in there, which is really what's leaning us to open our Tavern Building first over the Lad Gilman House. So again, we're planning to open that in September with all of the state guidelines in mind. Hopefully by then we'll be allowed to do guided tours, but if not, it'll be a self-guide experience for people. And then we're building out kind of an outdoor tour component as well throughout our grounds that will partner with it. So that's our plan for September. So we're planning on it, but have not done it yet. But if others have already opened, I would be very interested in hearing what that has been like.
Hi, this is Kristen Pesca from the Paul Revere House in downtown Boston. Our opening in the city of Boston was just permitted last week. We are officially opening on Wednesday, but I'll say that this week we had some open days to do testing, and I think that was very good for us. In some organizations, they were doing openings with just members first, but our organization is mostly, our audience is tourists. So members opening isn't really a useful model for us, but we didn't want to announce to everyone that we were open and have a line of people waiting the first minute of the first day. We wanted the ability to say, we just opened and then closed 30 minutes later, to be able to deal with if all the plans that we had didn't really work the way we wanted to. So we had several days of opening. We are using guided tours rather than self-guided tours as a control mechanism, because with a guided tour, the number of people is controlled, where they go and how long they stay in each place is very controlled. And like probably most people here, unless you're an out.
I'll say Kristen's audio sometimes cuts out because she doesn't have good Wi-Fi at home, but I also work at the Paul Revere House where I am right now. And I think, as she was just saying, that the guided
door site
Oh. Kristen, I was trying to jump in for you because your audio cut out. The guided tour format allows us more control over how many people are in the building. It was normally on a July day, we'd be getting like 1,000 people a day on average on a weekday, not a weekend, more like 2,000 on a weekend. And so we can't have that many people on our site at a time right now, obviously. And in the restrictions in Massachusetts are like seven people plus a guide, so 8 people total in a space like 1,000 square feet. So we are doing tours of 7 people max at a time plus our guide every 10 minutes or so. And that puts us maybe, when we were testing last week, probably like 1/10 of our average attendance, but still better than no attendance.
Hi, this is Susanna Crampton. I work for Historic New England. We just recently opened 6 of our 37 properties just this past weekend. And we are limiting the tour to on a half hour, on the hour, to groups of 4 to 6. We did an initial announcement to our membership so that they had the opportunity to sign on first. And now we're going out there more publicly to let people know, but people have to register online. There's no transaction, no sales transaction at the site. We're trying to be very safe. We are requiring masks and social distancing. And we just started, so we're taking baby steps to make sure everything's working fine. I'd be happy to report later, when we have a little bit more information. We'd be happy to share it with the NEMA community. It's been very interesting, and it's been hard to message as a PR officer. So right now we're moving into targeting what everyone is referring to as pods. So your family can exclusively have a tour or have an outside experience or rent a property for a picnic. We're doing a lot of things like that. The house tours just started, though, as I said, and I don't yet have a report in from how the weekend went. When we get it, I'll share it.
For folks that have done a test day, either with members or, opening by surprise in the case of the Paul Revere House, what have you learned from those experiences that have shifted some of your plans?
So are you talking about opening up to members first?
Well, it could go for any site that has been open for a few days, regardless of what type of audience that you're serving. How have you had to adjust plans based on real-time information and actually putting plans into place?
Well, one of the major things we've had to do is really enforce the message that tickets are only available online and in advance. We have had people show up, and we're not able to accommodate most of those because, as I said, the ticket tours are limited to 4 or 6. We're trying to offer as many opportunities as possible, but we've had to really push the message in advance and online only. That's been a major struggle.
I'm the Little Compton Historical Society in Rhode Island, and we've been open for almost 3 weeks now. We're doing something really quite similar. Every single thing we offer is by appointment, and we're only offering appointments to pods. So because the people who are coming on the property are, we assume, already familiar with each other, or at least taking responsibility for each other's germs, that relieves a lot of the pressure from us to keep groups separate or even require social distancing. I think it's going really well. We were hoping we could do away with that in August and be a little more flexible, but it's working so well, we're going to keep it through the summer. Like today is fully booked. We're quite small, so maybe 20 people will come today, but that is almost normal for us because last year we might have gotten just 12 people in a day. We are offering both an indoor special exhibition and an outdoor special exhibition. Every single person is choosing to go indoors. No one is afraid to go indoors, which was a surprise to me. Indoors, we can only accommodate 6 at a time, and we require that they wear a mask. Outdoors, our number is 15, and they can wander the property. We took our planned exhibition, which is women's history, and created 57 women's history biography banners that we nailed to the outside of our historic buildings, wandering the grounds and reading those books. They're able.
Kelsey, I think one of the things that surprised us so far has been the weather. Is such a challenge because we're trying to do stationed positions, like a station to greet people outside and then station tours inside, and having the weather being such an issue that was not so much of an issue before, where we're like in the baking sun for hours at a time. I mean, personally, all of us, I think, got sunburn the first day of our giving tours, but also just having to try to stage people at different places on our physical property to get their orientation for their tour while they're waiting to go on the next tour has been a challenge because we don't have a lot of shade in the middle of the day. So that is keeping social distancing and keeping people not fried in the sun has been a challenge.
I was thinking, so the State House is not open, and I doubt it's going to open anytime soon, and it's totally out of our control actually when it opens. So we're just going to react, when told. But I had been thinking, I love the use of the outdoors, right? I mean, I think everyone feels pretty comfortable outside. And I was thinking about, even for our tours, I was coming up with like a graduated plan of how we could do them. And one of my stages was you give 70% of the tour information outside the building, and then let them go and give themselves a self-guided tour for 30 minutes or something like that. So it reduces their amount of time in the building. It still gives them the nice human interaction and the personal touch. And if they have questions, they can ask them. But, you know, lots of the information can be delivered outside. And I think that's a great option.
So we have some questions and some answers from folks about how, if you're allowing visitors inside a historic space, how in the world are you cleaning up after them? How frequently? What kinds of products are you using? Do you have, you know, do you have to staff additionally to accommodate that sort of, that new role within the museum? Anybody can speak to that. I'd be curious to know the answer.
Yeah, hi, Eric Peterson from the Metropolitan Waterworks Museum. We are open as of last week. We have a very coordinated little dance that we do. And the guides are, so we do tours inside the building, limited to 8 people, all through Eventbrite. So we know there's no signing in. It's all done before they open the door. They have to show us that they have done that in order to get in, and of course wear masks. So our guides watch where people touch, so it kind of eliminates. We have a very large space, so would be impossible to do it all, but we can pretty much follow where people were and clean up after them. Usually that's whoever is not being the guide gets to be the cleaner person. We have 3 tours a day, so about half an hour between each tour, which is not quite enough time, so you have to run to clean it up before the next tour comes in. We use hydrogen peroxide solution. That's the CDC recommendation strength. One of the negatives of that, it tends to have a white film. So if you overspray stuff with that, especially on glass surfaces, it's funky and you can notice it. I've noticed that's been a problem. So windows and stuff get filmed over. We have all our interactives covered, so fortunately they're not getting sprayed. And we have a spray system also in the restrooms as well, if people do use the restrooms. So, and you know, the weird part is you do get masked up and gloved up when you do that. So there's certainly, it's a weird situation to go from giving a tour to quickly gloving up and masking up if you're that person, and following them fast as you can go, and also at the same time thinking, oh my God, I hope I didn't miss a spot here, or hopefully my glove doesn't have a hole in it. So that's this weird secondary dynamic of doing all this, what we normally do, and then having to be paranoid about it, and then resetting quickly for the next time. So it's definitely much more an exhausting experience than ever before. I don't know if we're going to get used to this, but it's something that we're a little more, at least familiar with how it's going to be. And of course, it reduces all other things you can't do so much as you used to, because you're busy doing the tag team dance there.
Scarlett also put in the chat feature some useful resources and stuff like that. I would definitely take a look at that, the AAM website, Connecting Collections, and also the Realm Project. So thank you, Scarlett, for that.
We decided to do our reservations by telephone because our audience, some are older and not super comfortable with computers. We put signs up on the driveway that we are open only by appointment with the phone number on the sign. And as long as we don't have another group scheduled at that time, we are happy to accommodate same-day appointments, instant appointments. And I think that's been good for our audience and helpful with people who do tend to pop in. Sometimes they don't have to go away disappointed.
We've had a couple of comments here about staffing. I think, Eric, people are curious to know if the folks doing your elaborate cleaning and touring dance are staff, and you've answered yes. Other folks have said they can't use volunteers because volunteers tend to be over 65 and are a vulnerable population. How are other folks dealing with that?
This is Emma at the American Independence Museum. I can say that one of the reasons we had to push back our on-site tours and even launching virtual tours is later than I anticipated, because we primarily rely on volunteer docents in a typical season to give all of our tours. And we have some that will not come back until there's a vaccine. And then of those, we also have some who do not feel comfortable doing a virtual tour. They're just not that well versed enough with the technology. I think we have, of our regular group of about 10 volunteer docents, we have one who's really ready to come back and give on-site tours, and no one else is in any rush. So part of what is a challenge for us as an all part-time staff is figuring out that balance, kind of like Eric was saying, of how much time we're putting into tours and devoting to doing tours versus other programming and the other work we need to do to get done. Our curator and our collections manager is also our volunteer manager. So not only does she have to do the tours, but she's also in charge of all of the other building work as well. So it's finding that balance when we don't have our usual core of volunteers to rely on to do these programming, that I'm finding a unique challenge of this time, and has definitely delayed our timeline a little bit in rolling out our tours. Again, interested to hear what other people are finding in the kind of staff versus volunteer breakdown of kind of division of responsibilities. And also, if your volunteers are coming back, and if they are, how is that, if they are or not, how is that impacting your capacity this year?
Hi, I'm Deanna. I'm from Southold Historical Society on the North Fork of Long Island. And I raised the question because we have a very small staff and we really rely on our volunteers who, like most of you, tend to be retirees. And we don't want to put them in any jeopardy by having them be docents or shopkeepers in our shop, etc. So while in New York, we were able to reopen earlier in July, my board decided to remain closed because we didn't want our volunteers interacting with the public. So I was curious, if most of you that have reopened, I'm a little jealous, but also if you were doing so with staff only because of similar concerns. So I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Just staff is working out fine for us because it's special exhibition tours, which are self-guided, not house tours. We're not going to do house tours this season. The attendance is so controlled and slow and small. And fortunately, we have been able to keep our small staff fully employed. It's honestly just kind of easier without volunteer management, volunteer recruitment this year.
So our guides are a mixture of college students who all went home and older docents who they're more sporadic. So we have when the building reopens, again, in that sort of phased reopening and tours thing that I was talking about earlier, we imagine that we used to offer tours every hour, on the hour, any day, don't even have to make a reservation. It was kind of a crazy schedule. And so we're going to ramp that way, way, way back to, 1 a day for a while, then maybe 2 a day for a while. Then once, our busiest time is usually the time that we've been closed. And so, I don't know what'll happen with that timing next year, but we imagine it as a phased reopening. It would start with just staff, and then we would bring in slowly, a couple of college students slowly expand our offerings and until we got back to some kind of normalish, but expecting that to take a year at least, almost.
I think one of the concerns that has come up a little bit in the chat is that sometimes the staff doesn't want to come back. They don't want to give the tours. So, I mean, that's definitely something else that I think we're all grappling with too, is that there's new constraints on just having employees in the building alone. So, I mean, that's definitely something to think about too. I just want to focus on that, you know, the staff does count as well. As Emily Holmes is in her mask because she's at work right now, so.
Yeah, it's because I was here by myself and now I'm a coworker who's at her desk. So, hi, Adrian. Yeah, back on. Yeah. As Kristen said in the chat, we had a couple part-time staff who chose not to come back at the current status. At least they may choose to return in the future, but I think institutionally, I think Kristen and I are both really proud that we've paid all of our staff the whole time, even when they weren't working. So we have a great core of part-time interpreters who work usually 1 to 2 or 3 days a week, and a small group of full-time staff. And so we're lucky that a lot of those folks who we've been paying all along are ready to come back now and start slowly integrating into the tours. As we were doing practicing last week, as she said, just us. It was mostly senior staff who were running the site on our pop-up opening, as it were. And then we slowly started working in 1 or 2 interpreters a day. So we're ramping them up now.
And I also want to echo something that was just posted in the chat with Cynthia Cowan saying their public-facing staff aren't excited about facing the public because they're worried the folks most likely to want to come visit now are the ones least likely to be taking COVID seriously. I would say my staff have certainly echoed that worry as well, and part of why our timeline was pushed back. 2 of my kind of frontline staff were saying the same thing of, we don't feel comfortable opening yet because we don't know if we can trust the public and if they're going to follow instructions. And we at the museum are part of the New Hampshire Heritage Trail, and a lot of those museums have started to open. We've been kind of letting them be the guinea pigs in a way, and hear about their experiences and taking all of their feedback and what they've learned to inform how we're going to reopen. And wait also for us until there's a little more information that's known. And I think also, as we're seeing too now, even in New England, more and more mask mandates coming out for cities and states, for people to get comfortable with that idea, because we will have a mask requirement when people come on site as well. So kind of letting others lead the charge. And we were happy to do that with the in-person stuff because we had the virtual programs and offerings we were doing as well. But it is that balance of, with the staff and volunteers, those who even feel comfortable coming on site and then feel comfortable facing the public. That's 2 kind of completely different things, whether you're in the office with other people or in front of the public. And also making sure that they have the training to feel comfortable with that. I know some of my staff have asked to go through that of kind of, how do we de-escalate a situation if we have someone that refuses to wear a mask or anything like that. So we'll be working on some of that training with our staff and volunteers as well. And I'm happy if anyone else has any insight or thoughts into that topic, just in terms of a kind of code of conduct or getting visitors to understand what your requirements are in advance, certainly for those sites that are open. Have people been respecting and abiding by those kind of restrictions and rules that you have? You know, it sounds like they have difficulty booking things online in advance, but otherwise, once they arrive on site, you could speak a little bit to how their behavior has been. That would be helpful for those of us that are planning to reopen but are not open yet.
I can say that dealing with a lot of out-of-state visitors rather than locals, people have been agreeable. We have not had pushback so far, but I think reminders are a thing. So they approach the ticket window with the mask on the chin. They're not wearing it as they walk down the street, even though the local population is. So if you can think about training to help people through that, but a thought about a little empathy towards some of these people who are basically 3 months behind us in mask training. They just started. So this to remind people they have to have their mouth and nose covered is a thing. I think a lot of us are so accustomed to it, and we've been doing it. People are jogging with a mask on, right, around here, but in other parts of the country, they're not. So if you have a non-local audience, just some empathy towards they're still getting the hang of this and treat it in that way, I think is helpful, that you're just doing it as a friendly reminder. And I think it was useful, especially if you can bring up those staff or volunteers that you have that are over 65 or whatever. This is to protect them as well. People are not trying to be horrible. So if you ask them to help you with something that you can specify, we have some senior volunteers, so please help us with this. That may be good.
Yeah, to echo what Kristen was saying, we're also doing contact tracing as per the requirements in Massachusetts for reopening, and we are trying to get people to do that at the ticket booth at our admissions window. And some people are saying, "Oh, I've never heard of this before. I'm not familiar with this." You know, and I think in Massachusetts, I think all of us have heard contact tracing for months, and so it's definitely like a familiar concept here. But for people coming from Ohio, some of them are like, "Oh, that's a really great idea. What a good thing to do." You know, like there's people who are like, "Oh, how wonderful that you're doing this." Like, and I think they just aren't familiar with it the way that we are already familiar with. It just seems normal now.
And I'm also seeing in the chat feature, there are a number of people who have said they've done videos as well that are on their website or social media to kind of inform visitors of what the expectations are when they arrive on site, which can also be helpful. So they have that information in advance before they come.
So with a few minutes to go here before we close out the town hall, I'm curious if there is anything that we haven't touched on, or an experience you want to share before we all adjourn for the morning. Now would be a great time. There are some excellent resources in the chat box if you have not already checked them out as well.
Dawn Salerno, I work at a historic house, and I don't think we've talked about private events, so I'll just add that we have reopening, we're reopen. We are lucky enough to have a garden, an outdoor space, so we're doing indoor timed, very limited visits to the house and outdoor events. But we did find that masks are much easier to control when it's just individual people from the public visiting. If you haven't started your private events back up, you know, it's going to be more, I would suggest you're probably going to have more staff intervention and mandating masks if you do. I've heard that some people are not mandating masks for their private events, but they do for the public. So we have a consistent policy for mask wearing across public or private events. And since we had our first event, it was a bridal shower, 30 people, seated, eating. The rule we established was kind of like masked while moving. If you're sitting and you're in your pod or with your family, you know, you can unmask to eat. Otherwise, masked or distant, and they were not following that. So I think it was asked earlier, kind of how have you changed, or how are you adjusting? So it's definitely going to mean more staff intervention at a private event where it's very awkward to ask, like, the couple or the bride or whatever to please mask up. But that's going to be our strategy, as well as all the kind of forward fronted messaging about here's the rules. We're going to add something to our contract. We don't have a disclaimer. I know a lot of people have you sign waivers. We don't have that, but we will probably add something to our event contract that says this is the expectation. So, but otherwise it was a very successful outdoor private event And we're having a lot of, I'm just grateful we have an outdoor space.
Dawn, that's remarkable that you've started back up with private rentals of your space. Has there been much appetite? Do you have others scheduled throughout the summer and fall?
Well, what we found is every single wedding, like some of you probably had the same experience, moved to 2021. But then these things were added on very late in the season, so this bridal shower booked, I think, in May for a July event. And we've also had another, somebody who wants to they're going to get married. The big wedding is 2021 now, but they still want to do something this year where they intended. So we're seeing that. And it's still not like what we'd hope it would be. But I would say if you're a smaller venue, like we're a max of, actually under COVID right now, a max of 100. But we've always been a small venue. So you might see, and we're hoping for like these people that want to do something, even a family party that they would have had indoors, but now they don't have the space for. We have somebody interested in running like a private party for 20 people and using our space. So I'm kind of optimistic. It's already almost August, but these were late ads, the 2 that we had put back on the books, and we've had some interest, from people just wanting to get out and do something different.
Dawn, can I ask you what your site is? Where are you located?
So we are the Roche Jones Duff House and Garden Museum in New Bedford, Mass. We're on a 1 acre. The house is on that acre, so it leaves, I forget what my square footage is now, but the Mass state says no more than 100 people in our space right now. So outdoor space. So that's us.
I have seen some sites do like small little pop-up weddings, but they're very, very micro.
Micro.
Yeah, Susanna. I didn't want to call Susanna, but you just raised your hand because I know Bullport was doing it, so I didn't want to put you on the spot. But yeah.
We actually have a campaign for micro weddings at our properties. We are taking 12 of our landscapes that are available, and it's just 2 hours. It is limited to 10 or 15 people. It depends on the state. But it's at the very, very reasonable price of $495. So we have seen some interest in people wanting to do the ceremony now, and then they'll do their actual celebration with their guests next year. It's been interesting.
Well, we are almost at the noon hour. So I do want to thank Emma and Kelsey for leading our town hall today. As always, if you have any suggestions for future programming, future town halls, definitely contact the NEMA staff. As I mentioned earlier, today's session is has been recorded and will be available on the NEMA website later on. And Scarlett has definitely put in a bunch of links on there with email addresses and links to other useful information. So Emma and Kelsey, do you have any final words?
As always, we're curious to know what types of programs and get-togethers are most useful for you all, having a fairly diverse set of needs. And so if you have any thoughts, I'll put my email in the chat, and I'm sure Emma would be glad to receive any suggestions. This is for conference, this is for digital programming now that we are unlikely to gather in large groups for some time. Anything that would be helpful to you, we're very happy to hear about.
Absolutely. I'll echo what Kelsey said and say, please let us know what you would like us to plan in terms of programming for the Historic Sites PAG, especially with this year being such a unique year. And thank you for joining us this morning. And thank you all for all that you do. I know it hasn't been an easy past 4 months, and we're all working to adjust, and the adjustments continue day in and day out. So thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for all you are doing, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.